an image. Oh, there we go. Okay, now we're recording. All right, so welcome. I'll get us going by acknowledging where I and Jessica and Kimberly are located. So we're in Huichin, which is more commonly known by its settler name of Oakland, California. Huichin is the traditional territory of the Lishan Ohlone people. And I want to give a shout out to Karina Gould, the spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lishan Ohlone, the first people of the lands in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. Karina is co-founder of the urban indigenous women-led Sogorea Land Trust, as well as a co-founder of Indian People Organizing for Change. One of the struggles that Karina has been heading up is centered in Berkeley, where a nearly 6,000-year-old ancestral burial ground and ceremonial site known as the West Berkeley Shell Mound is under threat from continued development. And right now, the area surrounding the Shell Mound is, it's basically a series of shops in Berkeley and then a giant parking lot. And so the parking lots become the site of the struggle. Even though the National Trust for Historic Preservation named the West Berkeley Shell Mound site one of the 11 most endangered historic places in the United States, the developers refused to negotiate the return of the land to Ohlone people. So one of the developers, her name is Dana Ellsworth, and she's refusing to negotiate with Ohlone people. So the fight goes on, and I want to thank Ohlone organizers for providing leadership and vision for building more sustainable relations and worlds. And there, I'm just showing you an image of the Sogorea Land Trust, a poster about the Sogorea Land Trust, and they've initiated a Shumi tax here in the East Bay area, basically calling on settlers to pay a tax to the original peoples of this territory. I also want to give a shout out to AFTI, the union representing contract or adjunct instructors at the UC. Earlier this week, the lecturers and UC management reached a tentative agreement and narrowly averted a strike. The union members have yet to ratify the contract, but the agreement, it looks like the agreement is a huge victory for our lecturer colleagues that will improve their job security, compensation, and working conditions. It's necessary to emphasize the extent to which solidarity with AFTI lecturers among students, staff, and faculty contributed to this win, this partial win. Over 800 Senate faculty pledged to withhold our labor and not cross the picket line in solidarity with our striking colleagues. Because UCOP loves to pit university workers against each other, so Senate and non-Senate faculty against graduate students, and Senate and non-Senate faculty against each other, this kind of solidarity is really necessary if we want to win. So congratulations to UC AFTI, their victories and inspiration to workers across the UC, and a reminder that direct action gets the goods. So I'm done now with my screen sharing, so I'll go ahead and turn this off. Okay, so now I'll introduce today's event on abolitionist praxis. So this event is being hosted by the Center for Society and Ideas at UC Riverside, and it's being co-sponsored by African Student Programs at UC Riverside. And I'll say a few words about the Cops Off Campus campaign that Dylan and I are involved in at the UC. I'll say a bit about the impetus for today's event, for today's discussion, and then I'll introduce our guests, Professor Kimberly King of Laney College in Oakland and Jessica Black of the Black Organizing Project, which is also based here in Huichin or Oakland. So Dylan and I are professor comrades in UCFDP and Cops Off Campus. And these coalitions came together during and in the immediate aftermath of the international uprisings following the police killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and too many others to name here. Radical faculty in the UC and CSU system came together to begin organizing as abolitionists to dismantle UCPD, as well as CUPD, and all other ties between UC and CSU and policing forces broadly writ. Our affinity group, which we named UCFTP, joined up with the National Cops Off Campus and Scholars for Social Justice campaigns, which are national and I think also international in reach. So COC, Cops Off Campus, kicked off its campaign October 1st, 2020 with actions on all 10 UC campuses. We created an informational zine and video on the history of the abolitionist movement, the relationship between movements to abolish racial slavery and movements to abolish prisons and policing. Our political education materials have also focused on reimagining safety and security and on the kinds of alternative structures that people have been building for generations to provide the housing, food, education, and spiritual resources that all people and communities need to stay healthy, right, and to stay out of cages. We also threw down during Abolition May with teach-ins, art builds, banner drops, and other actions that refused the reformist gesture of the police task force, which many of our UC chancellors convened, reconvened, and bolstered as a strategy of counterinsurgent distraction, and time and resource wasting. So the strength of our UCFTP and COC campaign has, I think, been in building out our political education programming through the zine distribution, in interfacing with campus communities through regular Coffee Not Cops tabling, banner drops and the like. And we're looking to build our strategic capacity this year and the years ahead, because it will be a multi-year struggle, by learning and moving alongside comrades who are creating abolitionist alternatives and supporting communities who are most impacted by the criminal punishment industry. Much of this work of building abolitionist infrastructure, especially here in the East Bay, is driven by nonprofit organizations and radical folks who work in public health, public education, as well as in labor movements. So today we're focusing our conversation, hopefully the first one of many, on public school educators and organizers who have succeeded in getting cops out of public high schools and community colleges. So we're joined today by Jessica Black of the Black Organizing Project and Professor Kimberly King of Laney Community College to discuss Oakland's long and eventually successful struggle to get police out of schools. So I'll first introduce Jessica Black, and I'll invite you, Jessica, to talk for about 10 minutes about the Black Organizing Project campaign. And then Jessica, once you've given us an overview, I'll introduce Professor King to talk about her revolutionary efforts in ending the Peralta Community College's contract with the Alameda County Sheriff's Department. After Jessica and Kimberly have spoken, Dylan will jump in and act as a respondent. We'll have a discussion among the four of us, and then we'll integrate questions from the audience into our discussion. So I'm really excited to hear Jessica and Kimberly discuss their organizing efforts to liberate Oakland youth and educators from the oversight of OPD and the Alameda County Sheriff's Department. So we'll get going with Jessica. Jessica is a Minnesota native with a passion for social justice and cultural interpretation. A mother of two, Jessica came to California in 2013 to reconnect with family. For 10 years, as the education systems navigator at the Cultural Wellness Center in Minnesota, Jessica worked to further enhance her skills of strategic planning, collective communication, shared authority, and motivational speaking. Jessica has worked to dismantle unequal systematic approaches in housing, employment, education, and criminal justice institutions for many years. Jessica embraces and is guided by the elders within her community. These relationships aid her in recruiting and organizing Black parents, to encourage their involvement in schools, and to influence policy, procedures, and paradigm shifts. Ultimately, Jessica's passion to help Black people recognize the power and potential they possess led her to the Black Organizing Project. Through BOP, Jessica hopes to continue her journey of achieving equitable access for Black people. So everyone join me in welcoming Jessica Black from the Black Organizing Project. Really excited to be in conversation with you today, Jessica.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you all as well. So the Black Organizing Project is a multi-generational organization who fights for social, political, and economic justice for Black folks. We led a campaign, a 10-year campaign, that led to the removal and the elimination of Oakland Unified School District Police Department. Our story is really a story of Black organizing, a story that we want to uplift and we want to make sure that we highlight. Oftentimes in our communities, when these type of things happen, it's easy to erase the fact that everyday working class Black people who were most impacted negatively by these institutions are the people who came up with alternatives, and the people who fought really hard to remove police from schools. Our strategy was a 10-year strategy. We knew that it wasn't going to happen overnight. There were a lot of things um, that we had to do leading up to that. So we were able to, in 2011, do an assessment and realize that there was no actual formal way for people to complain about police being on campuses, if they were harassed or anything like that. So we were able to fight and really win um, the complaint policy. Following the complaint policy, we knew that ultimately the district would be watching themselves through the complaints, but we did that very strategically so that we could start to see what people were experiencing on campus, and so that people actually had a formal way to get it in writing. Following that, we were able to get something passed called a MOU, or if you look, MOU with the city of Oakland through the COPS grant. And if you look at OUSD, it's called Board Policy 5145. And that board policy limited and defined the role of school police. Before that policy existed, there was no way that to actually define their role, no way of actually limiting interaction with police and students. And we wanted to be very clear that it was not the job of police officers to be disciplining students. And so we implemented that policy in order to mitigate harm and also track data and information. Inside of that policy, the police department was required to track the calls to service. So whenever school sites would call, they had to call and they had to report out on the information. So there was years and years and years worth of data that we were able to gather through those policies. Also, we put protections in place. Um, Inside of those policies, parents, you had to exhaust the entire emergency contact list. So a police officer couldn't just come on campus and just want to question a child. You had to exhaust the whole entire list. Students couldn't be arrested for things that honestly really were social, emotional type of issues. So if you showed up to school and because you're self-medicating and you have a small amount of marijuana, you shouldn't be arrested for that. You should be referred to services to be able to get at the root of what is happening with you and the why these things are going on. And so that policy really focused around that. And then finally, we were able to get the willful defiance policy passed it. So we looked at the suspensions, expulsions, and arrests, and disproportionately across the board, Black students were suffering. Um, and so with the willful defiance policy, children were being criminalized for childlike behavior in the classroom. And the willful defiance policy stopped the school district from being able to suspend students for childlike behavior. So if a child's in your classroom and they don't, throw away their gum, it's not a reason to kick them out of school and deny them an education. Um, that there could be other things in place. And so those are some of the initial things. Also in the early stages, we did not only just a lot of research, but a whole lot of listening to community. This took a whole lot of listening to community. In fact, in the very beginning, people didn't even realize the levels of policing that existed within Oakland Unified School District. At one point, there was 3 levels of policing that were actually happening to students. Oakland Police Department had the COPS grant. That was a unit of policing. Oakland Unified School District had its own police department. And inside of its own police department, it was governed by the school board. It was an actual real police department. And then there were unarmed security officers who were under police services at the time also. So there was three different entities, three different levels of policing that were happening to students. And people in the community were shocked. We were shocked to find that out also. And so we began listening, began organizing, began doing the research, and began to start to formulate like what our strategy would be to dismantle this police department. And so some of those policies that we got passed were incremental steps. We always knew that our goal was to eliminate the entire police department and really work to replace it with alternatives that the community called for. So more restorative justice counselors, trauma-induced services, more people who really to keep the culture of the school, more positive adults on campuses, and also changing the culture and really dealing with the root of the problem, which is anti-Black racism. And so, yeah, so we did that work. We fought very hard, and actually it was a very long and tiring fight. And in fact, most of the things that happened in the fight were not visible to people. We spent long nights at school board meetings, 2:00 a.m. We spent long nights strategizing, people bringing baby playpens for their children to sleep on as we're strategizing and looking through information and figuring out how we're going to push and how we're going to remove the police. It was, people didn't believe in us. People thought that we had a cute goal, if you will, and that it was not possible. But one thing that we were clear about is that anything is possible if we work together and if we work together collectively. And so we really relied on each other, on our membership, on our base. This was actually a very spiritual work. It was a faith-driven work that we did. And so lots of those things people didn't see and aren't aware of. We would conduct research and do reports, and people would disrespect us and be like, who did that for you? As if we weren't intelligent enough to do these things for ourselves. And so this fight was a 10-year fight that was really about healing. It was really about the power of the people, us knowing and holding and having faith that as long as we work together and we stay focused, we can do that. So we had many wins in between the elimination of the police department. And that was really the community taking their power back and standing up for what we know and what we believed was right.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that overview. And I'm, struck by a lot of things that you said, and perhaps most by what you've just said about, seeing the 10 years of struggle as a series of wins, right, on the way to actually getting this this contract annulled. So hopefully we can return to that. But we're going to hear next from Dr. Kimberly King, who is an instructor in psychology and ethnic studies at Laney College, as well as program coordinator of the Umoja Ubaka Student Success Community at Laney. And an academic equity program, this is an academic equity program designed to close the opportunity gap for African-American community college students. Kimberly serves on the Laney Faculty Senate and the Peralta District Academic Senate, and is a founding member of the Laney Chapter of the Poor People's Campaign and Black Minds Matter at Peralta, a transformative justice advocacy and organizing group of Peralta faculty, students, staff, and community members. From 2019 to 2020, Kimberly served as the vice president of her labor union, the Peralta Federation of Teachers, and before that as PFT's diversity chairperson from 2016 to 2019. Prior to Laney, Kimberly worked as an associate professor in the psychology department and Pan-African Studies department at Cal State LA for 15 years, where she was an elected leader in her labor union, the California Faculty Association, and the Academic Senate. Kimberly's research and writing has focused on inequality, especially the intersection of economic class, race, ethnicity, gender, and institutional barriers to academic success for low-income first-generation college students, and social justice activism. From 2005 to 2016, she was a producer and co-host of Beautiful Struggle, a political radio program she founded with the Beautiful Struggle Collective on KPFK 90.7 FM, the Pacifica station in Los Angeles. Kimberly currently serves on the editorial board of Rally Comrades, the political newspaper of the League of Revolutionaries for a New America. Born and raised in Oakland, California, Kimberly received her BA in psychology from Yale College and her MA and PhD in psychology from UCLA. And she currently lives in Oakland. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Erin, and it's a pleasure to be here talking with everyone. Thanks, Dylan, for inviting me, and thank you, Jessica, for leading the way in all the work that the Black Organizing Project has done. May I have a PowerPoint presentation, of course, being a professor. Is it all right if I share it? Not that the Black Organizing Project also has PowerPoint presentations sometimes too. I know that, because you guys have done presentations at our teach-ins, but share my screen. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be just telling you the story of our work, Black Minds Matter at Peralta's work at Laney. And Laney is a part of the district, Peralta College District. There's 4 colleges in our district. The Black Panther Party was founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seals, who were 2 students in our college district at Merritt College. We're Laney College, Merritt College, College of Alameda, and Berkeley City College. I'm sure I don't have to say this to you all, but the United States police kill more than any other country, any other wealthy country in the world. And in the United States, the brutality of slavery and genocidal land theft were part of our country from the start. It's different than other countries. All countries have their own history. We have a specific history, and that history of genocide and slavery are still with us today. They're a part of the capitalist system that controls our country, and it's still the legacy of slavery is still seen in the policing system that we have today. And we see that in the rates of police shootings, which I'm sure you all know this as well. This is from the Washington Post too. I mean, another sign of the problem is that we don't even have a systematic way in our country of collecting data on police shootings and police murder. The Washington Post had to start doing it, different private organizations, et cetera. That's unacceptable. And it is important to notice that although the rate is much higher among Blacks than it is among whites, there's a lot of people of all colors that are killed by the police in this country, and it's unacceptable. Also, people who are killed by the police are most likely to be poor. This is in, this data is very hard to find, but I'm glad to share this with you if you like. But this is looking, this is the white people killed by the police, Black people killed by the police, and Latino people killed by the police by census tract. The highest number on the left is the lowest, the highest poverty, the lowest income, et cetera. So. And police, school police kill people too. Unfortunately, there was recently a shooting in Long Beach of a young person by a school police officer. So summer 2020 is kind of when our work started. It's different than the Black Organizing Project being such a long sustained movement, although I think we both benefited from the George Floyd movement, which really kind of raised awareness and push things forward. And this movement of estimated 26 million people of all colors around the whole country really is something new and different. The New York Times estimated it as the largest movement in American history, the largest protest movement. And it really threatens the white supremacy that is related to the whole way our system is controlled. So it's a very threatening movement for the rulers in this country, but it's a very powerful movement for we the people. And the movement leapt past just saying we're against police killings, but also saying we want to actually get rid of the police. You know, I've heard Angela Davis, for example, and Ruth Wilson Gilmore talk about how, and Miriam Kaba, they had no idea, they are shocked to hear so many people talking about abolition now, but more and more people understand the need to replace policing with new forms of safety. People, you know, crimes don't just come out of thin air. And so there were all these young people risking their lives during a pandemic to protest. And so some of us faculty at the community college were like, well, what can we do to support them? And the things that the colleges were doing were really focused on ideological stuff like unconscious bias and white fragility. And we really wanted to go beyond that. We wanted something tangible that was going to affect real people's lives. And we wanted something that connected to the demands of the movement, which we connected with the defund idea. Divest from law enforcement, invest in vital services, education, housing, mental health. So a group of faculty got together. It started with me and one of my friends, and we reached out to more faculty from the ethnic studies department. We reached out to the student president at Laney College. We reached out to other activists, faculty, and staff in Peralta, and we decided to start a petition, no sheriffs at Peralta colleges. Now, we went to the Action Network. We got over 2,000 signatures on this petition. We got help from community organizations, most notably the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland, California was very supportive and helpful in getting our petition circulated and in getting other community organizations to support it as well. So this is our general timeline that, so the board voted. So this is kind of amazing, but I really think it's a testimony to the time, the protests of George Floyd murder and the murder of so many others, as well as the fact that there were some people from within the district who were already considering changing the relationship with the sheriffs. So our campus police were the Alameda County sheriffs. Sheriffs, the same sheriffs that work in the jail system, were also working on our campuses. And so there were already people inside our district that wanted to change it, but there was a lot of pushback with our work of getting the petition, getting a lot of community members and students and faculty and staff to testify at the Board of Trustees meeting in June of 2020. 1 month after George Floyd was murdered, the board voted to terminate the $4 million contract with the Alameda County Sheriffs. And they said we're going to terminate it in December. Now, however, there was no plan really put in place by the district. And some of us were very worried that, okay, they're not going to put a plan in place and then they're just going to say, oh, we got to go back to the sheriffs. So we just decided ourselves to come up with a plan. So we did our own research. We have one of our members of ethnic studies faculty, his name is Roger Chung. He works with a very important program called Restoring Our Communities. It's a program for formerly incarcerated youth. He had a lot of knowledge that we benefited from. And so we came up with a plan. So June 2020, they voted to terminate it. December 2020, they actually did terminate it and they replaced the sheriffs with unarmed security guards. But that wasn't our plan, was just, okay, let's just replace public armed security with unarmed private security force. No. So we're still working. So now we tried to shop our plan around to the district, and I was actually kind of surprised, but the Board of Trustees actually endorsed a version of our holistic safety and wellness plan in June of 2021. However, the district is still not implemented anything. So our plan for holistic safety and wellness includes mental health counselors. In doing our research, we found we have about 1/3 of the number of recommended therapists that we should have on our campuses. When I was a student at UCLA, they had group therapy, couples therapy, dissertation therapy, anything you needed. At Laney, you know, we have like one therapist for 10,000 students. That's unacceptable. So we're pushing for more therapists, for restorative justice training. There's something called mental health first aid training. We're just trying to change the whole environment on the campuses. But this is still not happening. Recently, we put out a letter. It was a joint letter from Black Minds Matter of Peralta, Laney Poor People's Campaign, and the Laney Ethnic Studies Department. Laney is the most activist campus of the 4 campuses now. And so we need to get, so now we're involved in really focusing on implementing the holistic safety plan, pushing for that. We have to bring in more students, faculty, and staff into Black Minds Matter and just ramp up the activism again. We are talking about forming a caucus with, I see one of my colleagues here, Juan Zamora, and we're talking about forming a caucus in the statewide California Community College Faculty Senate to reimagine. So it's kind of like Cops Off Campus, but for the community colleges. So that's where we are now, trying to implement the plan and build unity with others. Also hope that we can work with the Black Organizing Project and Cops Off Campus and other groups to kind of really keep working together and share strategies and provide advocacy and activism support as needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for that overview. Now I'm going to bring in Dylan Rodríguez to join the conversation. Dylan is an abolitionist teacher, scholar, and collaborator. He was an inaugural Freedom Scholar awardee in 2020, and last year published his most recent book called White Reconstruction, Domestic Warfare and the Logic of Racial Genocide. So Dylan is one of the co-founders of UCFTP and Cops Off Campus, and is also co-director of the Center for Ideas and Society. Welcome, Dylan.
Right on, you all. You hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Peace. Okay, so welcome. I want to say I appreciate being part of the conversation. I'm talking to y'all from occupied, colonized Cahuilla and Tongva land. I'm actually I'm in a park right now. I'm about 2 blocks away, maybe 3 blocks away from where the Riverside Police Department stole the life of Taisha Miller in 1998, shortly before I became a faculty member here. So I'm honored to be in conversation with the 2 of you and with everyone else who's here. And I hope the folks who weren't able to log in will be able to watch the recording that we're going to be posting up. Y'all really provoked me into more provocations. So I'm just going to offer some reflections and frame them with some questions. And then I really want to blast it open and try to get some of the folks who are here participating with us to engage with the conversation. Jessica really put, I think, an emphasis, a grounded emphasis, a living emphasis on how it is that grassroots Black organizing, as long, protracted, in this case, a decade's worth of organizing. I mean, we gotta emphasize that, right? This is long, protracted grassroots Black organizing, right? It's not just people that are trying to get together for an event, right? Not trying to get together to create one mobilization that is a spectacle for the media, right? This is long, protracted grassroots organizing. It's hard. And I want to come back to how hard it is, because I could feel it coming out of you as you talked about that, because I know you're still in it. But the thing that I just wanted to amplify from Jessica's outline is how that long, protracted grassroots Black organizing actually creates abolitionist solutions and infrastructures. It creates it. In that long protractedness of it, right? It's the very fact of its being long and protracted that ends up being the kind of incubation of all these forms of abolitionist creativity that we talk about in kind of flourishing, rhetorical, and abstracted and aesthetic terms, which is good because we got to think about abolitionist creativity all the damn time. But listening to you talk through this helps us understand how these abolitionist solutions and infrastructures and changes happen in the context of all that. I mean, everything from stuff that a lot of us don't want to mess with, right? Immediate institutional and maybe citywide policy changes, right? Y'all are in that. You figure out how to work with that. You figure out how to leverage that. I mean, that's one arm of struggle that that I think some of us struggle with. I know I do. You know, I need to be invited into that with other people who have the expertise and the insight and the analytical framework. Most importantly, the analytical framework. And again, the analytical framework comes from that grassroots organizing. The fact that you all were talking about direct interventions on police protocols in relation to schools, that's close and near and dear to everybody who's involved in any form of police abolition and cops off campus struggle. The fact that y'all are intervening on police contact with children and students. This is what we're talking about, right? I mean, this is stuff that seems to make so much sense that it's almost embarrassing that we have to, once again, rely on the insights and the work of long protracted Black grassroots organizing to figure this out and to exemplify it. It also, for me, raises the question that I know both of you are dealing with in real time, and a lot of us are dealing with in real time in different ways, which is this other problem that's emerging now in what I'm obsessively naming as what will be a long reformist moment that I think we're going to be forced to inhabit and navigate for the coming period of time. I'm concerned with how reformist structures, reformist attempts to appropriate abolitionist solutions and changes, how reformist structures will try to compromise the abolitionist opening that y'all have created, right? And that these movements have created. So that's one stream of thought that came to me as I was listening to you all. The second one that's related to all this is it's another kind of question, which the two of you talked about in different ways brilliantly, which is the question of whether and how police power itself, right? Meaning the way police perform power, right? With the surveillance, the threat of violence, the disciplinary nature of it, and also the omnipresence of it, right? The kind of the habit of just being accustomed to this particular form of power, structuring your everyday life, your breath, your way of being. The problem I think that we're confronting is how police power is in real time again being reinvented and re-administered through non-police institutions. You know, how we got to ask the questions of how people like us, right? How teachers, social mental health care workers, others are constantly being deputized through reformist concessions to abolitionist movements and demands. So we're in that now. And I heard you talk about that a lot actually in your comments, Kimberly. You know, that's the struggle, right? Is how these institutions are accommodating abolitionist demands by way of deputizing police power into softer hands, so to speak, right? Jessica, I want to come back to something you said that I referenced just a minute ago, which is the fatigue and the exhaustion. You know, I want to kind of dwell in that for just a few seconds to, well, first of all, to honor it, just to acknowledge what you said, that this shit is fucking tiring, right? It is exhausting. And it's a characteristic, the fatigue and the exhaustion is a characteristic of long-term organizing. So I think maybe as a working question for you just to marinate in for a minute is and this for both of you. I want to ask what the experience has taught you and taught the people and loved ones and comrades around you about sustaining long-term organizing. You know, knowing that you've got that fatigue and exhaustion all over you, all around you, pressing on you all the time, right? So like, what can you tell us in particular about dealing with that and maybe even politicizing it? You know, I mean, in a collective sense of politicized, right? This is part of the politics of the struggle, is dealing with the long-term fatigue and exhaustion. And then I just have two more points. I promise I'll shut up after that. Kimberly's your presentation brought back something. I have a few students that are here right now, and so this is gonna be familiar to them because this is what I had them thinking about for their midterm assignment. But you started us off by blurring what typically would be named as the past and the present of anti-Blackness, of genocidal colonial state violence, and so forth, right? That this stuff blurs, that the past is never past, it's always present, right? That's the blurring you introduced us to, right, in your first comments. This makes me think of how what we're talking about in that blurring, right? When we talk about how the blurring of the anti-Blackness of chattel slavery, which is hemispheric and it's global, right? And it's also acute and it's deeply personal, right? How that blurring is about creating a condition of terror. And that's what terror feels like. What terror feels like is when you feel that violent past on you all the time, in the presence of police power in whatever form it takes, whether it's a cop or not a cop, right? That this is what terror is like, and it's to take seriously how the fact of policing is that it is legitimated asymmetrical domestic war. I've been coming back to this constantly with folks who I think thankfully are, I think, increasingly open to not just understanding policing that way, but also acting on it that way. Realizing this is not, this notion of asymmetrical domestic war, it's not a metaphor. This is actually what the state has been telling us that they're doing for years, for decades, in fact. So in that sense, I'll just close my comments out by saying that I think y'all remind us that the bare minimum that we could do, the absolute minimum we can do, is to liberate educational institutions from police power. That's just a bare minimum, which is really to say, it's not just getting rid of the cops, right? It's not just cops off campus. It's also to abolish the climate of terror, right? Which is deep work. And again, that is protracted work, which is to say, to abolish the terror, you're talking about the gendered anti-Black terror that pervades every campus any of us knows, right? I mean, it is part of any campus we know, and I don't care what your demographic is of students, faculty, and staff. It is what defines every campus any of us knows. And finally, part of what Kimberly reminds us with the outline of the struggle in Peralta Community College District, part of the current institutional scramble is also an attempt to contain and domesticate the long memories and the long histories of police violence at our different campuses and educational institutions, right? This is one of, I think, the most underappreciated, not underappreciated, I mean understudied aspects of how the reformist response is trying to contain the abolitionist uprisings of this period. Is they're trying to treat everything in a very present tense way, as if there is not this long record and a very recent record and an ongoing record of this violence. So part of the work, I think, is to do the work that Kimberly was exemplifying for us at the start of her comments, which is to constantly bring that record forward. The testimonials, our folks at UC Davis and all over the UC system were doing it the last couple of days in reminder of that pepper spray incident. The worldwide blasting of the pepper spray police incident that happened at UC Davis campus during the Occupy movement, right? But the record is so much deeper than that, and it's also so much more reflective of anti-Blackness than that. So I think that constant kind of activist, theoretical, abolitionist reminder of these memories and how people carry them with carry them on their bodies, carry them in their everyday experience is also central to all this. So I'm looking forward to talking with all you, but yeah, I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much for talking and sharing with us.
Wonder if I could add my 2 cents as well. Just piggybacking off of, Dylan's comments and, responding to some of the history and struggle that you've shared with us, Kimberly and Jessica. I just wanted to emphasize the point that you made towards the beginning of your overview, Jessica, about, how you all had to further define the role of the police, right? And this is something that is really at the center of police power in this country, right? Is its undefinability. Policing has been, within legal discourse and other discourse, not defined, purposefully not defined, so that it could be dispersed as far and wide as possible, right? So the role that you took on and that your co-organizers took on in making making it clear that these, the practices that police are engaged in, these terrorizing, warring practices on communities, need to be defined for the community, and the community has a role in actually making it known to people what and to themselves what police are doing, right, in these institutions. I think is really important for us to think about. And then, just to uplift what you said, and which Dylan brought up in his comments about, creating more barriers between police and between students and youth and other community members, right, is kind of the main tactic that abolitionists have taken on, right? We need to limit contact between people and police as much as possible, right? By calling in mental health workers instead of police, calling in, other community resources to deal with instances of harm and distress. And so when you said that, you were all running through emergency contact lists, and engaging those contacts prior to the police, I just wanted to underscore that, because I think people are often at a loss when confronted by, what do we do if X happens? What do we do if Y happens, right? And so building out our emergency contacts basically is one really important step. And I just wanted to highlight that. And then in response to what Dylan just said about Kimberly's presentation, kind of positioning us in relation to the long history, right? The foundational history of slavery and genocide in this country, that policing comes out of and cannot be disentangled from, right? I mean, some of us, when we see cops or near cops, right, that terror is proximate, right? It's not just proximate, it's inside of us, right? It has shaped us. And it's mind-boggling, and completely understandable, the lack of historical consciousness, right? That we have to navigate when we're in conversations with people about policing, and its fundamentally violent nature, right? Policing is about force. Police are they get to decide how much force to use in order to protect private property, right? That's their function. They're not here to protect any people. So, doing that work of bringing people into this long history is so important. And so I just wanted to thank you for doing that.
Jessica, would you like to say anything in response? Or would you like me to say something first? I'll say something first and then. But I really want to learn a lot from Jessica and from the Black Organizing Project about really, okay, we got rid of the sheriffs. Now what? How are we going to create a safe environment for the students, faculty, and staff that's also a just environment, an equal environment, a fair, a positive environment? We have all these resources that have come from COVID and everything. Our campuses need to be using that to promote true wellness and true safety on our campuses for our students. And I would love to talk more about some of these real specific approaches to that. I wanted to say at another level too, that all of us, I think, are engaged in a process. Even the reforms are part of a process of our people learning more and more how to fight. People are learning how to fight. And we have to keep fighting forward. Even, for example, the defeat of Trump. I mean, I am not a fan of the Democratic Party, but we needed to defeat Trump, not because we love Biden, but we have to decide, okay, what is going to hurt our people, what is going to help our people, and keep going along that path. And part of what our struggle is in this fight against terror, against brutality, against outright murder of our people. I remember when I was a host of Beautiful Struggle several years ago, and a young man from LA, he was the first one I ever heard say police murder, to define it, not police brutality, No, they're murdering people. That I had never heard anybody say that before. And now that is something that more and more of us acknowledge. No, they are murdering people. But in that fight, we're learning, but there still needs to be a lot of political education. I just see political education as a big part of the process to help more and more people get on board to lead to the kind of changes that we need. There is a backlash against the movement that happened. And they're trying to say, oh, there's all this crime. We cannot defund the police. There's too much crime. There's murder. And it's, they even use it by saying because it's Black people who are being murdered, or they'll say it's anti-Asian hate crimes. All the things that they're using are things that we care about. We don't want hate crimes. We don't want anybody to be murdered. But police are not what's keeping us safe. Police are making things more unsafe. But that political education about that process is a big part of our work. And we, as through the Poor People's Campaign, we do teach-ins every semester. And we had a whole teach-in about reimagining public safety. And that's a part of what our ongoing work is, in my understanding. And luckily we're not in North Dakota right now, because a lot of what we're talking about is critical race theory. Yes, racism is built into every institution in our society, and that's because racism built capitalism. Capitalism is built into every institution in our society. Racism, capitalism, and genocide. And abolition is the solution. Abolition of prisons, abolition of policing, and abolition of capitalism and private property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there were so many things that were said. I'm going to try to address many of those things. One thing that I want to be very clear about is that, as Kimberly was just saying, how racism is embedded in all these institutions and capitalism. That is real. And so when we are on these front lines, when we are in the middle of these fights, they are going to be exhausting. And they have tactics, right? Just from the development of how they run. There are tactics that are designed to try to wear us out. And how do we savor some of that moment? We do. That's why organizing is important. That's why developing bases, having memberships, developing leaders to be able to lead is really important. When we're talking about the power of the people, that's exactly what that means, because we're talking about years and years and years of historical drama, right? And historical trauma and murder and genocide that has been happening forever. And there are people who are complacent in that, and people who are comfortable in that, and people who are not willing to and don't want to reimagine. So they're going to fight to keep those structures in place. A lot of what we're seeing in just in Oakland today, as we're talking about the rise in crime and all of these things, we've always had violence. That's not a new thing. The things that people are bringing up, they're not new things. These are called counter-revolutionary tactics is what it is. We made some movement, and now that we've made that little bit of movement, they're trying to figure out ways to counter that. And we can't fall into those narratives. A lot of times we'll entertain those conversations, and we have to be forward thinking. We have to always be forward thinking ahead. We have to be the radical reimaginers. We have to be the people that believe. We have to be the people that are willing to stand, and also the people that are willing to bring the people who are most impacted to the forefront so that they are leading the fight, because people who are most impacted are the people who are going to create and develop the alternatives, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that if you think that it's not going to wear you out, that's not true. It is. There is going to be exhaustion in that. But remember, of all of the people, I think about all the people who are incarcerated, all of the mothers and fathers and grandmothers who are currently right now, while we're on this Zoom, and we have the privilege of being on this Zoom, on their knees, falling on their face, praying to God to save their children, right? we have to remember that that is exhaustion also. That's a level of murder. I'm sorry, my phone is going off. That's a level of murder. They're killing people's spirits, right? Their mere presence of them. And so when we're thinking about this idea of being in it for the long haul, we can't allow these moments when we do get movement. We can't allow ourselves to be celebritized. We can't allow ourselves to be individuals. We have to continue to move collectively, because that is where we're going to get our strength from. We get our strength from our people. That whole walk of faith that I was talking about is real. That is where you get your strength from. You get your strength when you look at your children, and your children are saying to you, come on, we can do this. Let's go. You know, this is where we got to get our strength from, because we have to realize that if we give up in this fight, that basically we then become complacent and saying it's okay to kill our folks, and it's not. So that's one thing I want to say, is that I think fundamentally developing the base and actually organizing and developing the people, which also takes time. So sometimes things happen and we want to have automatic responses. It's not always strategic to just respond to everything that the opposition puts out. Sometimes it's strategic for us to continue to develop and build our folks up, so that we then can have this collective front, united fight. The other piece that I would say, just in terms of the implementation, because of that context that I just gave, what we chose to do at the Black Organizing Project, after we won the elimination of police from schools, sorry, just gonna keep going on, the elimination of police from schools, what we decided to do was, we were clear, we didn't want to be community stakeholders. We had experienced and seen long enough what community stakeholders look like. And basically a group of, like, you get a policy passed and then the district will come and go off and do the work on their own, or the institution will do the work on their own and come back and tell you what they're about to do and get a little, no real engagement, get a little sign off on it. We wanted to have a community-driven process where the people who are most impacted, the people who are closest to the school sites, voices would be uplifted. We wanted to make sure that we had real decision-making power in the process. So what we did was, we started off doing a co-convenership. That was our first fight when we got in the door. We want to be co-conveners. We don't want to be community stakeholders. And we went through that. Then we took the district through a community process, right? So they're uncomfortable all the way through, because we're like, no, we're going to talk about principles of this group. We're going to talk about values in this group. We're going to talk about how we're going to deal with tensions. We're going to talk about what our agreements are going to be, and we're going to deal with that. We're going to struggle through these things together. And I understand that you have a timeline, but guess what? What we're trying to change, to actually transform school culture and climate and eradicate, not just eliminating policing, but eradicating the school to prison pipeline mindset. There's a whole mindset shift around policing, as Dylan was saying, that also has to go, right? We're not going to do that by the end of the year. That's not going to happen. And so we went in with that mindset. We went in with clear bottom lines around that. And we went in knowing that we also would not let the district pin us up as OUSD and BOP. Absolutely not. And so as we fought for the initial setting, what we did was, we did an initial setting, set some grounding principles, and then we're like, wait a minute, we need our allies at the table. We need other community stakeholders at the table. We need other people who represent other groups at the table. And so then we opened it up, this community-driven process that then started to form this design team. And on the design team, other community organizations that represent parents, that represent Latinx folks, that represent students with disabilities. We even have people on the design team that are educators in the classroom, other district staff people, so that there was a diversifying of voices. Because what we understand is that all of these entities have to be organized in order for us to do this. And it is still a struggle. It's a struggle because the district has so much bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy is honestly designed to wear us out. But we keep finding ways to call a spade, call things out when they're not right. Even if it is a previous policy, even if it is a previous structure, well, that needs to be looked at. because anytime that we're trying to create real change in your own systemic practices are barriers to us creating that change, this is a part of the new wave. We are radically reimagining everything.
Thanks, Jessica. I just wanted to note for folks who are interested in getting involved in Cops Off Campus, Hannah has put a link into the chat where folks can fill out a form and you'll be added to a list and you'll get information about getting linked up to events and meetings. So just wanted to let folks know about that. And Jessica, I read the Black Organizing Project's report that came out in 2019, the People's Plan for Police-Free Schools, OUSD implementation plan. And I noticed that Black Organizing Project really seemed to leverage the language that, OUSD has been using around equity and access, to kind of force OUSD's hand, right, in eliminating OUSPD. And, I think it's worth reminding people of the bloated police budget in Oakland was $2.3 million, I think, last year, or maybe it was the year before. And just to reiterate that, OUSD is the only district in Alameda County to ever have its own police department, right? So you were up against this kind of monolithic, all these monolithic structures. And I'm just wondering how you navigated specifically like the language question, right? So there's a lot of emphasis on the school to prison pipeline in the report. And then, OUSD has been using the language of sanctuary as well over the last while, to talk about student safety. And so I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit about, how you use that language to kind of hold OUSD accountable.
This is really interesting because there's two parts to this. There's one part where it was about real people and real people's stories. And it was like what people were really experiencing. And one thing that we believe at BOP is that we get to tell our own story. And so we tell our people, our community tells our own stories. And so a lot of what you see in there is really just about our experiences. So the district would say that they have restorative justice practices, but the first thing to cut on the budget would be the restorative justice practitioners. So you're not a restorative justice district. And then when you look at the levels of suspensions and expulsions of Black students, I mean, there was data following what we were saying, that you're not a restorative district. And so in terms of some of the other language like Black sanctuary, for example, right? Or not Black sanctuary, or sanctuary district, we had to call the question out of our real experience, sanctuary for who? Because there's never been a Black sanctuary for Black people. So let's be clear about that in this country. And so when you're saying OUSD is a sanctuary district and you're still calling the police on Black students, you're still calling ICE on Black students, you're still calling police on Black students with disabilities, that's a problem. You're calling the police on Black students for having childlike fights. That's a problem. And so what we did was we actually just elevated and lifted up our story through the false narratives that they were putting out there, because it wasn't true. Like there was no, like, what sanctuary, where our students are failing on every level in academics. Like the school system is not working for us, right? The kids are getting kicked out of school. You can go to school and get arrested. You can get followed by the police, all the way to school and get arrested. There's so many different ways. There's, so many different levels of criminalization and policing that happen, from attire to just everything. And so we just lifted up the experiences that our young people were explaining to us, that our parents were explaining to us, and the community was explaining to us, and we countered that. And then we didn't just stop and just only state the problem. We also did some imagining. So what would it look like for us to have Black sanctuary? What does that look like? What do we want to see inside of the schools? And then we laid out this People's Plan for Police-Free Schools. But I will tell you, even when we laid out the People's Plan for Police-Free Schools, there was still a huge resistance from the school board members to that. Like, we told you how you could actually eliminate the police from schools and what could be in place. And there was still a discrediting of that. In fact, Jody London at the time was a school board member. She She literally sent an email back, like we sent the email out to her. About 10 minutes later, she sent the email back. This says nothing in here about protection for school board members against disgruntled community members. So you're more afraid of the constituency that you serve than you couldn't have read the document, right? So I will just say that we just, it's real people's lives and real people's experience that we were able to elevate. Our own.
They are afraid, right? And yeah, they are afraid. And I think, so I bring up this question around language because, the UC, like, all other ruling class institutions, they're really good at appropriating movement language. And the UC notoriously over the last decade has stolen the language of restorative and transformative justice to further punish, workers and students at the school. So I think, it's really, it's helpful to highlight that contradiction, right? And it's a point at which people can begin to organize and, do some of that historical work of uncovering sort of the colonial roots of schooling institutions in this country, as well as the, emphasis on the part of freedom organizers, right? That education is also a site of liberation. So thank you, Jessica. Kimberly, did you have anything to say about the campaign at Laney and Peralta more widely and around this issue of language?
I'm not really. I mean, I would love to hear if there's any questions from people out there. There's 80 people on there now in terms of, I'm wondering if there's, issues that people are working on their campuses, what's going on, what kinds of things are you facing, what's making you want to do this, how's it working so far? I definitely can relate to the, that you have to, like what Jessica said, it is going to make you tired. I mean, we were meeting every week for about a year. I mean, I know that's nothing to Jessica, but for me, that was a lot to meet every single week for a year. And then we needed to take a break, and then we're coming back to it again. We're going to keep, and the political education is what kind of keeps me going. If I didn't understand this in a larger context, if I was just trying to get rid of the police and that was it, I don't think I could keep going. So like we have regular political discussions as a part of our meetings and things like that. So I guess I would just like to say that, and that really keeps me going. But I'm really interested in what other people are facing. I mean, to be honest, I think that part of the reason we were able to be successful was because it was during COVID, and a lot of the more conservative people were not engaged. And luckily we were able to kind of, some of us have a stronger willingness to fight and to get involved. I am worried once, I mean, luckily COVID is helpful for us in this regard, because it's keeping our ability to keep moving forward. But I'm very interested in what kind of barriers other people are facing and what kinds of successes you might have had, if any.
And I'm just going to add that I see a bunch of abolitionist practitioners and, organizers and students and whatnot in the audience. So I'm going to egg y'all on to either raise your digital hand and come on live to ask a question, or do what Erin just did and put it in the chat. So yeah, take advantage of these last few minutes with our folks here, with Kimberly and Jessica.
Yeah, and as we're waiting for more questions to come in, I'll just raise a question that's been posed by members of UCFTP, and we've spoken to it a little bit tonight, but just wanting to hear from both of you about what kinds of coalition building was at work. I mean, you've discussed this a little bit, but Kimberly, I see your background, Moms for Housing, and I wonder if you can just talk about some of the coalitional work that you've done in the past that contributed to this win at Laney, and what kinds of coalitions were really important to building abolition at the community college level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, we have to be part of city politics. And luckily right now we have some real fighters in Oakland, like Carol Fife, who did come out of the Moms for Housing movement. Some of you may know, definitely people in Oakland know, but you know, a group of homeless moms took over a house in West Oakland that was owned by corporate landlords and really used it to make a point about, you know, there's all these empty homes in Oakland, and yet there's babies and women and men and everybody sleeping in the streets. And in Oakland, I think it's 70% of the homeless are African American. And Oakland is not even a predominantly Black city anymore. It used to be. So just being a part of the fight for, kind of like what Jessica was saying when she said, we have to rely on the people who are most affected. The people who are being hurt the most are the ones that are gonna be able to lead forward. And so I try to affiliate myself with the people who are fighting themselves for the changes that are needed in society. So like the moms fighting against corporations for housing and against the mayor, quite frankly, against politicians who are totally endorsed by the real estate industry. You know, some people are building coalitions and building, like Carol, for example, has weekly Facebook meetings where she tries to teach her constituents what's going on in the district and things like that. And tries to just say things in regular language to get regular people involved. So definitely being hooked up with people like her when she was an activist or when she was a leader in the ACE and Moms for Housing and Housing for All movement. There's people starting to get into elected offices who are not the same old types of people in elected offices. Right now, we have two pretty powerful women on the city council, Nikki Fortunato Bass and Carol Fife, who are fighting for housing for all. They're fighting to reimagine safety. They're under attack though. They are really facing broad attack from the police and from the people that represent the police. So yeah, for us, it's working with powerful leaders. What I mean by powerful is people that are fighting for the people at the bottom and people that talk to real people about their problems. Working with people like that, working with I mentioned the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, the Anti-Police Terror Project, Black Organizing Project, and the student government. For us on the campuses, is really important for the faculty to work with students and student leaders, and the classified staff, as well as bringing in people from the community. So I would say that.
Thank you, Kimberly. Well, we've got a question from Felice, Cops Off Campus comrade Felice, that is connected to what we're talking about right now. And Felice asks if you two could address the various groups you had to address and be in conversation with to produce the decision to get the cops out of schools. You know, what groups were you in conversation with, and where did you have to apply pressure and tension to produce this outcome?
Jessica, go for it.
So for us, it was a lot of different groups. In the beginning, it was our own community, and it was about political education. That was really key, and that was really important. In addition to that, like you'll see later on in our campaign where OEA, the teachers union, became like very strong allies for us. We launched a whole mini campaign around the teachers union where that was about political education, and that was about organizing, and it was about leadership development, even with educators. What we know is that the school to prison pipeline starts when the child is kicked out of the classroom, right? And so, and while a lot of folks would be willing to come forth and tell the stories of their comrades, there wasn't a lot of accountability for self. People weren't willing to like really tell the story of like, well, what about the time when you suspended so-and-so and kicked them out of the class? Or what about the time that that you didn't know what to do and you decided to call the police? You know, like, let's talk about those things. So we launched the Black Sanctuary Pledge, and that was actually a mini campaign inside of our campaign. We had very close allies that were actually in LA. Labor Community Strategy Center in LA was our allies for many, many years, and Cadre for many, many years. Later, from being in being invited to the Dignity in Schools campaign coalition, and later we were a part of helping to frame and be a part of the Dignity in Schools California campaign. And that is folks all across the state of California who are looking at the removal of police and the ending of the school to prison pipeline. And then as you see closer to us, when we had lots of unintended allies and people that came from out of nowhere, all kind of labor unions came, religious folks stepped up, community-based organizations that were our allies before, but maybe were afraid that our demands were a little too radical. And maybe not even in some cases, definitely people didn't believe in it, but as the momentum started to rise and people started to see that we were actually going to win, people started to come together and want to help and want to support in the different kind of actions and stuff that that we were putting on. And these things are very important. And the reason why they're important is because sometimes people don't believe, right? They don't believe that things are possible. But through the power of organizing, we were able to show people that something that they thought was impossible was very possible. And there was still an opportunity for you to be involved in support and pushing across that line. So that was really beautiful. So those are some of the pressures. Of course, we had to pressure the school board. We had to gain the principals. At first, the principals were actually being used against us in saying that the principals wanted to have police. So we had to organize the principals and apply pressure to the principals. And that happened. Yeah, and even like the labor unions inside of the school districts, we had to apply pressure and have conversations with. So there was a lot of different moving parts. The city council folks, we definitely went to them and pressured them for support and pressured them to pressure the school board members as well.
So education and pressure at all levels, it sounds like. Kimberly, did you have anything to add?
Well, just kind of related to that question and a similar question that I saw in the chat. I think that we had a lot easier way to go than what Jessica and the Black Organizing Project dealt with. The OUSD is much larger than the Peralta District, and there's a lot more entrenched stuff going on there. And I think that we were very fortunate. Our main people we had to, and also, like I said, because of the coronavirus, we didn't have to fight as much our own people. Like there probably would have been some more faculty and staff who might have been opposing it, but they were not around. The main, I saw some people talking about, how did you get ready for meetings and things like that. We came from the outside, really. We put pressure on the board of directors. We did not be like, oh, Chancellor, will you get rid of the police? We basically got our petition. That was the first thing we did, really, was let's show that a lot of people don't agree with this. Because we didn't think they were just going to listen to, faculty and students. So we didn't even worry about that. We went straight to the movement. The movement is what helped us, the people, the community. So the petition, then testifying at the Board of Trustees. We found out who can make the decision. It was a Board of Trustees. So every place there's probably different people who can make the decision. In our district, the Board of Trustees made the decision. So we put all of our pressure against the Board of Trustees. We did it through petition. We got different organizations to write letters, individuals to write letters. We got people to testify to the board at the Board of Trustees meetings. We wrote editorials, posted on Facebook and various other social media, and that's who we focused on. Now it's more of a challenge because we're trying to work with the district directly, but we're probably going to start having to go back on the more activist approach because it's moving too slowly. But at this point, because of all of our activism, the district now is like acting like they want to listen to us. But I think it's really important what Jessica said earlier, you know, don't become a celebrity or an individual or anything like that. You know, you got to remember it's part of the community and the collective, and keep going in that direction. But also, we can't think of things as, in my opinion, like we have our goal of providing a certain environment for the students and for the faculty and the staff. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to try to figure out how to do it. I don't care if it's called reform. Somebody wants to call it reform. Somebody wants to call it something else. We're on a path to, in my opinion, the only way we're going to ultimately solve the problems we have is through a drastic change in our society or a revolution. But on the way, we have to try to get whatever we can for our people and whatever it takes without being immoral or unethical or things like that. That's what we have to do. We got to meet with the chancellor. We meet with the chancellor. We don't have to kiss their butts. We just meet with them. It doesn't work. We go on the outside, inside outside strategy. That's part of it too. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I really like that language of inside outside, you know, in terms of thinking about strategy. And we've actually got a few questions from a few different people that address this tension, right, around reform and how we navigate, you know, institutional power and, you know, move through non-reformist reforms or whatever we want to call them, while keeping our eyes on, right, the prize of abolition.
That's right.
But we've only got 2 minutes until 5:30. So unless Dylan, you want to respond to these questions in our last couple of minutes, I think we'll probably.
No, you know what I'm saying is that I actually think the questions are exemplifying the desire for political education that people are mapping out. So I just put in the chat that these are some dynamic questions, and I think that these dynamic questions, alongside this video, once we put it up, once we post it, this can actually shape you know, several sessions of collective study. So yeah. I just want to tell folks that even though we're not going to get to remotely even a fraction of all these questions, they're going to be put up for posterity because these are great for collective study. This is how it should be.
Exactly. So I was going to say that, you know, this is the first of hopefully a series of conversations that we'll have around strategy, you know, abolitionist strategy across educational institutions, you know, in the coming year. And so I would love it if we held another conversation where we address these questions that people are sending in. So thank you so much, everyone who has joined us tonight. Thank you, Dylan, for providing space for us to have this conversation. Thank you, Jessica and the Black Organizing Project for getting cops out of Oakland schools. Thank you, Kimberly, for your organizing efforts at Laney College. I'm really excited to have been in conversation with you tonight. I'm excited to keep the conversation going. Dylan, do you have any words before we go?
No, just love each other. That's all. Just keep doing the care work that you all do, and watch each other's back. And I'll quote my friend Amika Tendahi from Chicago, that one of the co-founders of Ujima Medics. I want us to embrace a sense of deep shared responsibility to each other. So intervene on each other when you're sensing that somebody near you and close to you is getting too exhausted. To the point where they're declining. So I just see that in both of you. So I'm embracing that with both of you. So I just met you, Jessica and Kimberly. I know you a little bit, but I think that sense of deep responsibility is something that we have to just practice as an abolitionist ethic, as an abolitionist way of being with each other. So let's do that.
Right, and as we're talking about, you know, calling ourselves in around our own engagements with police, I'll just remind folks of MH First here in the Bay Area and in Sacramento, community medics, and they will respond to mental health and other health-related crises. I I don't have a link to give people, but if you Google MH First, you'll see contact information. And it's really important to give people tools outside of 911 and the regular numbers that we call in emergencies. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and you'll hear from us soon with more events to come.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Erin, so much.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Beautiful.
Care.
See y'all soon.
Take care, everyone.